My parents abandoned my paralyzed brother, so I stepped up and became his guardian. They disowned me for it. Years later, my mom has cancer and is begging me to care for her the way I took care of him. When I was 17, my 9-year-old foster brother Kyle was paralyzed from the waist down. The day it happened, our parents sat at his hospital bed and gave us this huge spiel about how we're going to get through this together. They told Kyle they'd be there for every step of his journey, and for the first few weeks that they actually stuck to their word. My mom told her work it was a family emergency, and my dad did the same. They puffed pillows, researched medical terms, did everything right. But clearly caring for Kyle got too hard. Their growing absence started small. Mom would miss the bus and couldn't make it because her car was getting fixed. Dad would be helping friends through a hard time when doctors needed to give news. Within weeks, I found myself being the one to sit beside my little brother while he cried about never walking again. I'd massage his legs while he sobbed, telling him our parents weren't abandoning him. But I wasn't so sure. By the second month, I was staying up all night learning about paraplegics, how to treat them, even looking to take out loans to maybe get my brother some miracle surgery so he could walk again. I'd tell my parents everything, but they'd just ask a few surface-level questions to act as if they cared, then start talking about something else. He'll be fine. Doctors know what they're doing, Mom would say. You're our real child. We'd care more if it happened to you, Dad added once. I felt crushed. One night, Kyle called me excited, telling me to come to the hospital now. He told me I needed to see this. When I arrived, I saw him moving his leg. He was crying tears of joy. I called my parents to tell them the news, barely able to hold back my own tears. Okay, that's cool, I guess. Just like that, the moment was ruined. On the day that was supposed to be the most hopeful of his life, Kyle had never looked so sad. The months passed by, and I was still the one doing everything. When Kyle started bending his knee, I provided physical therapy to extend his range of motion. When he started moving his ankles, I saw it first. When he cried to me, afraid it was all for nothing and his movements would never return, I held him and promised him he'd walk again. My time was consumed with taking care of him. I was a senior, didn't even have time to finish college applications. All the while, my parents acted like life was regular. They even took a holiday to Spain, claiming they needed it for their mental health thanks to what Kyle was putting them through. The final straw came the day Kyle walked again. He called me saying he knew he could do it, but he wanted us there before he tried. I told my parents. They were at work but promised they'd make it. I sat at the hospital bed with Kyle for 11 hours waiting for them. They never came. Kyle took his first steps with only me there. I recorded him, crying happy tears. I sent the video to my parents. They responded with a, "Sorry we missed it, we were so tired," but that's very nice for him. What's even worse is the day Kyle came home, they threw a celebration with all their friends. Their friends praised them for being by Kyle's bedside. They took photos, family pictures of everyone, and later posted them, talking about how hard times create unity, and how this was the hardest thing they've ever done. Kyle bawled his eyes out later that night. They don't care about me. They act like they do. But you actually do. I held him. I know this is weird, but can you be my mom? I said yes. Right after I graduated high school, I moved out and started working at Walmart. And as soon as I had the tiniest amount of money saved up, I filed to take Kyle from my parents. My parents were taken aback, calling me a monster for taking their little soldier from them after everything they did for him. But I didn't budge. I held out strong. And when Kyle spoke openly about his condition and how I was the one who cared for him while our parents sat idly, the judge didn't even hesitate. I started fostering Kyle a week before his 12th birthday. I didn't hear from my parents for the next 3 years, and neither did Kyle, until I got the call. It was my dad. "Your mom has cancer. Can you help her? Please." I stood there in my tiny apartment kitchen, phone pressed against my ear, completely frozen. 3 years of silence, and now this. Kyle was in the living room doing homework. He'd just turned 15 last month. I could hear him humming to himself, completely unaware that our past had just crashed back into our lives. "Katie, are you there?" My dad's voice cracked. I'd never heard him sound so desperate. I mumbled something about needing to think and hung up. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my phone on the counter. Kyle looked up from his textbook. "Everything okay?" he asked. I nodded and forced a smile. "Just work stuff. Nothing important." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mom. Cancer. The word felt heavy. Despite everything they'd done, or hadn't done, I couldn't just ignore this. But I also couldn't forget how they'd abandoned Kyle when he needed them most. How they'd taken credit for his recovery. How they'd fought me when I tried to give him the care he deserved. The next morning, I called in sick to my shift at the grocery store where I'd been working since Walmart. Kyle was already at school. I stared at my phone for 20 minutes before finally calling my dad back. "What kind of cancer?" I asked when he picked up. "Breast cancer. Stage 3. His voice was flat, exhausted. "They found it 2 months ago. The treatments aren't working like they hoped." I took a deep breath. "What exactly do you need from me, Dad?" "She needs someone to drive her to appointments. I can't take any more time off work or I'll lose my job. We're already drowning in medical bills." Of course, they needed a caretaker. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I have a job too," I said. "And Kyle." My dad said his name like it was foreign. "How is he?" "He's great. Straight A student. Plays basketball now." I felt a surge of pride mixed with anger. They'd missed everything. There was a long pause. "Katie, I know we messed up, but your mother is really sick." I told him I'd think about it and hung up again. I spent the rest of the day cleaning our apartment aggressively, as if I could scrub away the decision I had to make. Our apartment wasn't much. A small 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood that I could barely afford on my grocery store salary. The walls were thin and the plumbing temperamental, but it was ours. Kyle's basketball trophies lined the small bookshelf, next to my high school diploma, and a few framed photos of us at his games. No pictures of my parents anywhere. When Kyle got home, I tried to act normal, but he knew me too well. "Something's definitely wrong," he said, dropping his backpack by the door. "You only clean like that when you're stressed." I sat him down and told him about the call. His face went blank. That same expression he developed in the hospital when the doctors would deliver bad news. Self-protection. Are you going to help them? He asked quietly. I don't know, I admitted. What do you think I should do? Kyle shrugged. They're still your parents. They were supposed to be yours too, I reminded him. He looked down at his hands. I don't need them anymore. I have you. His words hit me hard. At 20, I was barely an adult myself, yet here I was, raising a teenager. I'd missed out on college, on normal young adult experiences, on everything my friends were doing. But looking at Kyle, I knew I'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat. That night, I made a decision. I called my dad back and told him I'd help, but on my terms. I'd drive mom to one appointment, see how it went, and decide from there. I wouldn't bring Kyle unless he wanted to come, and I wouldn't pretend the past hadn't happened. Thank you, Katie, my dad said, his voice thick. I know we don't deserve your help. No, I agreed. You don't. The following Tuesday, I took a half day from work and drove to my parents' house for the first time in 3 years. It looked exactly the same. Same beige paint, same manicured lawn. The garden my mother had once tended so carefully looked slightly overgrown now, the roses wilting in the summer heat. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, gathering courage, watching the curtains for any sign of movement. When I finally knocked, my dad answered immediately, like he'd been waiting by the door. He looked older, gray streaking through his hair, new lines etched around his eyes. He reached for a hug, but I stepped back. Where's Mom? I asked. He led me to their bedroom. Mom was sitting on the edge of the bed, tying a scarf around her head. She'd lost weight, her skin pale and papery. The room smelled of medication and the lavender air freshener she'd always used. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. Katie, she whispered. You came. I nodded stiffly, not trusting myself to speak. The woman before me barely resembled the mother I remembered. Vibrant, always perfectly put together, never showing weakness. Now she looked fragile, diminished. The appointment was tense. I sat in the waiting room while Mom got her treatment, surrounded by other cancer patients and their loved ones. A woman across from me held her husband's hand while he received an IV. An elderly man read quietly to his wife. Families supporting each other through the worst times. Exactly what my parents had failed to do for Kyle. Dad tried, making small talk, asking about my job, my apartment. I gave short answers. When he asked about Kyle, I showed him a recent photo on my phone. Kyle at his basketball game, grinning in his jersey, his teammates surrounding him in celebration after winning a crucial game. He looked so grown up, Dad said, his voice thick. That's what happens in 3 years, I replied. After the appointment, I helped Mom back to the car. She was weak, leaning heavily on my arm. Her body trembled with exhaustion, and I found myself instinctively adjusting my pace to match hers, just as I had done for Kyle during his recovery. As I drove them home, she asked if I would come back Thursday for her next treatment. I'll try, I said, non-committal. When I got home, Kyle was waiting, pretending to do homework but obviously anxious for news. His textbooks were open, but I could tell he hadn't turned a page in hours. How was it? He asked. Weird, I admitted. She's really sick, Kyle. He nodded slowly. Are you going back? Probably. I don't know. I sank onto the couch beside him. I feel like I'm betraying you. Kyle shook his head. You're not. You're just being you, helping someone who needs it. I looked at him, this kid who'd been through so much and somehow emerged kind and thoughtful. When did you get so wise? He grinned. Learned from the best. I ended up going back on Thursday, and the following Tuesday. Each time was awkward, filled with careful conversations that danced around the past. Dad kept trying to act like we were just a normal family going through a tough time. Mom was too sick to say much at all, but I caught her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, her eyes filled with something that might have been regret. The waiting room became familiar, the same receptionist who now greeted me by name, the same worn magazines, the same antiseptic smell that brought back memories of Kyle's hospital stays. Sometimes I'd find myself staring at the other families, wondering if they had their own complicated stories, their own regrets and resentments simmering beneath the surface. After the 4th appointment, Mom asked if Kyle might visit sometime. I told her I'd ask him but wouldn't pressure him. When I brought it up to Kyle that night, he surprised me. I'll go with you next time, he said, just once. The following Tuesday, Kyle came with me. He was quiet in the car, staring out the window, his knee bouncing nervously. I reached over and squeezed his hand at a red light. You don't have to do this, I reminded him. I know, he said, but I want to. When we arrived, my parents were waiting outside. Mom gasped when she saw Kyle, her hand covering her mouth. Dad just stared. The last time they'd seen him, he'd been a child. Now he stood nearly 6 feet tall, his shoulders broad, no longer the fragile boy they'd abandoned. Kyle walked up to them, confidently, no trace of his past paralysis except a slight unevenness in his gait, and said hello like they were strangers, which in many ways, they were. Mom reached out to touch his face, then stopped herself. You're so tall now. The appointment was even more awkward with Kyle there. He was polite but distant. Mom kept looking at him like she couldn't believe he was real. Dad barely spoke at all, his eyes darting between Kyle and me as if trying to reconcile the years he'd missed. Afterward, as we were leaving, Mom asked if we would come for dinner sometime. Just to talk, she added quickly. I have things I need to say to both of you. I glanced at Kyle, who gave a small nod. Maybe next week, I said. In the car, Kyle was quiet again. Finally, he spoke. They look sad. They are sad, I replied. Mom's really sick. No, I mean they look sad about us, like they know they messed up. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Too little, too late, don't you think? Kyle shrugged. Maybe. I don't know. We drove in silence for a while, the familiar streets of our childhood passing by outside the windows. So much had changed, yet so much remained the same. You know, Kyle said finally, I used to dream about them coming back for me, for us. I'd imagine them showing up at our door, saying they were sorry, that they'd made a mistake. My heart ached for him. And now I just feel sorry for them, he said. They missed out on everything. That night, I got another call from Dad. I expected more guilt tripping about the dinner, but instead, he sounded panicked. Mom's in the hospital. Her white blood cell count crashed. They're keeping her for observation. I told him we'd come tomorrow. After I hung up, I sat on my bed, overwhelmed. Part of me wanted to ignore them completely, to protect Kyle and myself from getting hurt again, but another part remembered the family. We used to be, before Kyle's accident revealed who my parents truly were. The next day, Kyle insisted on coming with me to the hospital. As we walked through the sterile corridors, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. How many times had I walked these same halls to visit Kyle? Now we were here for my mother. Mom looked even worse in the hospital bed, tubes running into her arms, monitors beeping steadily beside her. Dad was slumped in a chair, his clothes rumpled like he'd slept in them. He probably had. When he saw us, he jumped up. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice hoarse. "Both of you." Kyle hung back by the door while I approached the bed. Mom's eyes fluttered open, and she gave a weak smile when she saw me. Then her gaze shifted to Kyle, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "My boys," she whispered. I didn't correct her. Kyle wasn't hers anymore. He was mine. A doctor came in while we were there, a tall woman with kind eyes named Dr. Patel. She explained that Mom's immune system was severely compromised from the chemotherapy. They were giving her antibiotics and monitoring her closely, but she'd need to stay in the hospital for at least a few days. "Is someone able to stay with her?" Dr. Patel asked. "Patients do better with family support." Dad looked at me, desperate hope in his eyes. I felt trapped, cornered. Kyle stepped forward. "We can take shifts," he said quietly. "Right, Katie?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to remind everyone that my parents hadn't taken shifts when Kyle needed them. But looking at Kyle's face, I saw something I hadn't expected. Compassion. Not for my parents' sake, but for mine. He knew I'd never forgive myself if I walked away now. "Right," I said finally. "We can help." For the next 3 days, we fell into an exhausting routine. Dad would stay overnight at the hospital, then go straight to work in the morning. I'd come in after my morning shift at the grocery store. Kyle would join me after school, then we'd go home together in the evening. Mom slept most of the time, occasionally waking to smile weakly at us before drifting off again. On the third day, while Kyle was in the cafeteria getting us coffee, Mom woke up more lucid than she'd been since entering the hospital. She patted the edge of her bed, asking me to sit. "Katie," she said, her voice stronger than I expected. "I need to say something while I can." I sat stiffly, bracing myself. Was she going to try to justify what they'd done? Make excuses? "We failed you both," she said simply. "There's no excuse for it. We were selfish and afraid." I hadn't expected this. I'd prepared for denial, for manipulation, for guilt tripping, not for a straightforward admission. "Why?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for years. "Why did you just stop caring about Kyle?" Mom closed her eyes briefly. "We never stopped caring. We just couldn't handle it. The doctors, the therapies, the uncertainty. We convinced ourselves he'd be fine with the medical team, that you were old enough to help." She opened her eyes, meeting mine directly. "But the truth is, we were cowards. We couldn't face his pain, or our failure to protect him." "That's not an excuse," I said, my voice tight. "No," she agreed. "It's not. Nothing could excuse what we did." We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the steady beeping of her monitors. "You did what we couldn't," she continued finally. "You were there for him. You saved him. I didn't do it for you," I said. "I know." She reached for my hand. I let her take it, her skin paper thin against mine. "You did it because you love him, because you're stronger than we ever were." Kyle returned then, balancing 2 coffee cups. He paused in the doorway, sensing the tension. "Everything okay?" he asked. Mom turned to him, tears streaming down her face now. "Kyle, I'm so sorry. For everything." Kyle set the coffees down carefully. He didn't rush to comfort her, didn't offer immediate forgiveness. Instead, he pulled up a chair on the opposite side of the bed from me. "I used to hate you," he said quietly. "Both of you, for a long time." Mom nodded, accepting this. "I don't anymore." Kyle continued. "I just don't feel much of anything about you now." His honesty was brutal but necessary. Mom closed her eyes, absorbing the blow. "That's fair," she whispered. Dad arrived then, breaking the moment. He looked between us, sensing he'd missed something important. Mom was discharged the next day, her condition stabilized enough for home care. The doctor gave strict instructions about medications, warning signs to watch for, when to come back immediately. As we helped her to the car, Dad pulled me aside. "Will you still come to the house? Help with her care?" I hesitated. The conversation with Mom had shaken me, but it hadn't erased the past. "I'll help with appointments," I said finally, "but I can't be there all the time. I have my own life." And Kyle. Dad nodded, disappointed, but not surprised. "We understand." Over the next few weeks, a strange new routine emerged. I'd take Mom to her treatments twice a week. Sometimes Kyle would come, sometimes not. He'd started basketball practice again and had made new friends at school. His life was moving forward, as it should. One day, after dropping Mom at home following a particularly rough treatment session, Dad asked me to stay for coffee. I agreed reluctantly. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd eaten family dinners years ago. The house felt like a museum of our former life. Familiar, but untouchable. "I've been thinking," Dad said, staring into his mug, "about what happens if your mother doesn't make it." The bluntness startled me. "The doctors seem hopeful," I said automatically. Dad shook his head. "They're being kind. The cancer's spreading. The treatments aren't working like they should." He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "I'm not telling you this to guilt you into spending more time here. I don't want to make the same mistake twice." "What do you mean?" "With Kyle, we kept pretending everything would be fine until we couldn't face it anymore. I don't want to do that with your mother's illness." He took a shaky breath. "And I don't want to wake up one day and realize I never tried to fix things with you and Kyle." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him it was too late, that some things couldn't be fixed. But another part recognized the effort it took for him to be honest. "I appreciate you telling me," I said finally, "but I can't promise anything, and I definitely can't speak for Kyle." Dad nodded. "I understand." When I got home that night, I I found Kyle on the couch with a friend from the basketball team, a lanky kid named Marcus. They were playing video games, laughing and trash talking, normal teenage stuff. I stood in the doorway watching them, struck by how ordinary and extraordinary this moment was. Kyle had overcome so much to get here. "Hey, Katie," Kyle called when he noticed me. "We ordered pizza. There's some left in the kitchen." "Thanks," I said, smiling at his friend. "Hi, Marcus." "Hey, Ms. Katie," Marcus replied, not taking his eyes off the screen. "Kyle's cheating, by the way." "Am not," Kyle protested, elbowing his friend. I left them to their game and went to the kitchen, grabbing a slice of cold pizza. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Mom asking if you and Kyle want to come for dinner Sunday. No pressure." I stared at the message, conflicted. Just then, Kyle came in for a soda. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my expression. I showed him the text. "What do you think?" Kyle shrugged. "Up to you. It's up to both of us," I corrected. "This affects you too." He thought for a moment, opening his soda with a hiss. "I guess we could go. Just dinner, right? We can always leave." So that Sunday, we found ourselves back at my parents' house. Mom had clearly put effort into the meal despite her weakness. Pot roast, Kyle's favorite from when he was younger. I wondered if he even remembered that. Dad hovered anxiously, refilling water glasses, asking if we needed anything. The conversation was stilted at first. Mom asked about school, and Kyle gave polite but brief answers. Dad mentioned a project at work. I talked about a promotion I was being considered for at the grocery store. Normal family dinner talk, except we weren't a normal family. Then Mom brought out a photo album I'd never seen before. "I've been putting this together," she explained, her hands trembling slightly as she opened it, "since I got sick." Inside were photos of Kyle's basketball games, recent ones, pictures clearly pulled from the school's social media pages. There was Kyle making a three-pointer, Kyle with his team after winning a tournament, Kyle at what looked like a school dance with a girl I recognized as his friend Alicia. "How did you get these?" I asked, unsettled. "I've been following the school's Facebook page," Mom admitted. "I know it sounds creepy. I just wanted to see him growing up, even if it was from a distance." Kyle stared at the album, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up at Mom. "You could have just asked Katie for pictures. I didn't think she'd want to share them with us," Mom said softly. "We didn't deserve them." The honesty hung in the air between us. Kyle reached for the album, turning pages slowly. "This one's from state semifinals," he said, pointing to a photo. "We lost, but it was close. It was a tiny opening, but Mom seized it. Were you nervous?" And just like that, Kyle started talking about basketball, about his team, his coach, the training regimen. Mom and Dad listened intently, asking questions, genuinely interested. I sat back, watching this careful dance unfold, not quite forgiveness, but something like acknowledgement. After dinner, as we were getting ready to leave, Mom handed Kyle a small box. "I found this in the attic," she said. "I thought you might want it." Inside was a tiny basketball trophy from when Kyle was 7, his first season playing, before the accident. I'd forgotten all about it. Kyle turned it over in his hands. "I remember this," he said quietly. "Coach Ronald gave me this even though I was terrible." "You weren't terrible," Dad said. "You were learning." Kyle slipped the trophy into his pocket. "Thanks," he said simply. In the car on the way home, Kyle was quiet again, staring out the window. Finally, he spoke. "They're trying, aren't they?" "Seems like it," I agreed cautiously. "Do you think they really changed? Or is it just because she's sick?" I gripped the steering wheel, considering. "I don't know. Maybe both. People sometimes need a wake-up call." Kyle nodded slowly. "I'm not ready to forgive them," he said, "but I don't hate being around them as much as I thought I would." It was progress, I supposed. Small, tentative progress. The next few weeks brought more dinners, more careful conversations. Mom's condition worsened, then stabilized, then worsened again. The cancer was aggressive, spreading to her lymph nodes despite the treatments. I found myself spending more time at their house, helping Dad manage her medications, cooking meals they could reheat easily. One evening, while Mom was napping and Dad was at the pharmacy, I was cleaning up the kitchen when I noticed a stack of mail on the counter. Medical bills, mostly. Enormous amounts that insurance wasn't covering. No wonder Dad was so worried about missing work. I was putting the mail back when I noticed something else. Brochures for colleges. Local ones with programs I could attend while still living at home with Kyle. There was a sticky note on one. "Katie might like this one. Nursing program." I was still staring at them when Dad returned. He looked embarrassed when he saw what I'd found. "I was going to mention those," he said, setting down the pharmacy bag. "Your mother and I were talking. We want to help you go back to school. If you want to." I felt a surge of anger. "Now you want to help? After I had to drop everything to take care of Kyle?" Dad flinched. "We know it's too late to make up for that, but it's not too late for you to get your education." "I can't afford college," I said flatly. "I can barely afford our apartment." "We'd pay," Dad said. "We've been saving. For both of you, actually. College funds we started when you were kids." I stared at him. "You're telling me you had money set aside this whole time? While I was working at Walmart trying to support Kyle?" Dad looked down. We didn't think you'd actually go through with taking him. We thought you'd come back." The admission stunned me. They'd let me struggle, let Kyle struggle, thinking we'd eventually give up and return to them. The sheer arrogance of it made my blood boil. "We were wrong," Dad continued quickly. "So wrong. But the money is still there. It's yours. Both of yours." I grabbed my purse and keys. "I have to go." "Katie, please. I'll be back tomorrow for Mom's appointment," I said stiffly. "We can talk about this another time." I drove home in a fog of anger and confusion. When I got to our apartment, Kyle was doing homework at the kitchen table. He looked up, immediately sensing my mood. "What happened?" I told him about the college funds, about Dad's admission. Kyle listened, his expression darkening. "So they could have helped us this whole time?" he asked. "While you were working double shifts and I was getting secondhand basketball shoes?" I nodded, throat tight. Kyle pushed away from the table, pacing the small kitchen. "That's messed up," he said finally. "Really messed up." "Yeah," I agreed. "It is." We were both quiet for a moment, processing this new betrayal layered on top of the old ones. "Are you going to take the money?" Kyle asked eventually. I hadn't even considered that. "I don't know. It It feels wrong. Why? Kyle stopped pacing, looking at me intently. It's your money. They set it aside for you. And honestly, they owe you way more than tuition after everything. I thought about it. About the years of struggle, the missed opportunities, the exhaustion of working and parenting and barely staying afloat. Maybe Kyle was right. Maybe this wasn't charity. It was the bare minimum of what they owed us. What about you? I asked. There's money for you, too, apparently. Kyle shrugged. I've got 3 years before college. Let's worry about you first. The next day, I took Mom to her appointment as promised. Dad tried to bring up the college funds again, but I cut him off. Not now, I said. Mom doesn't need this stress. Mom looked between us, confused. What stress? What's going on? Dad started to speak, but I interrupted. Dad found some college brochures he thought I might like. That's all. Mom's face lit up. Oh, Katie, that would be wonderful. You always wanted to be a nurse. I was surprised she remembered that. It had been a dream of mine in high school, before everything happened with Kyle. Maybe someday, I said non-committally. After the appointment, Mom was exhausted. I helped her into bed while Dad made tea in the kitchen. As I was adjusting her pillows, she grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Take the money, Katie, she said, her eyes intense. Don't let our mistakes ruin your future too. I stared at her. You know about that? Of course I do. She released my wrist, sinking back into the pillows. It was my idea to set up the accounts in the first place years ago. I didn't know what to say. Mom closed her eyes, suddenly looking every bit as sick as she was. We failed you both so badly, she whispered. Please don't fail yourself because you're too proud to accept help now. Her words stayed with me all day. That night, I talked it over with Kyle again. I think you should do it, he said firmly. Go to school. Become a nurse. You'd be amazing at it. What about you? I asked. I can't just focus on myself now. Kyle rolled his eyes. I'm 15, not 5. I can handle you having classes. Besides, it's not like you'd be moving away. I thought about it more over the next few days. The idea of finally pursuing my own dreams was both exhilarating and terrifying. I'd been focused solely on survival, mine and Kyle's, for so long that I barely remembered what it felt like to want things for myself. The following Sunday at dinner, I brought it up. I've been thinking about the college thing, I said carefully. If the offer is serious, I might be interested in looking into it. The hope that flashed across my parents' faces was almost painful to see. Of course it's serious, Dad said quickly. We can go over the finances whenever you want. I'd need to keep working part-time, I said, and it would have to be somewhere close, so I can still be home for Kyle. Whatever you need, Mom said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. We'll make it work. The next day, Dad showed me the accounts. They were substantial, enough for 4 years at the state university for each of us, with money left over for books and expenses. I felt a complicated mix of emotions looking at the statements. Relief that my dream might actually be possible. Anger that this safety net had existed all along while we struggled. Confusion about what accepting this money would mean for our fragile reconnection with my parents. No strings attached, Dad said, as if reading my thoughts. This money is yours and Kyle's regardless of anything else. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That night, I applied to the nursing program at the local community college. It was a start. I could transfer to the university later if things went well. Kyle helped me with the application, sitting beside me at our tiny kitchen table, pointing out typos and suggesting improvements to my personal statement. You should mention how you took care of me, he said. That's basically nursing experience already. I smiled at him, this kid who'd somehow become my biggest supporter. Good idea. 2 weeks later, I got an acceptance letter. Kyle insisted on celebrating, ordering pizza and inviting his friend Marcus over. They made a ridiculous banner out of notebook paper that said, Katie's going to be a nurse, in uneven letters. I laughed until I cried, overwhelmed by their enthusiasm and my own conflicting emotions. I called my parents to tell them the news. Mom answered, her voice weak but happy. That's wonderful, Katie. We're so proud of you. The words hit me harder than I expected. When was the last time they'd said they were proud of me? Had they ever? Classes would start in the fall, giving me time to arrange my work schedule and prepare. Kyle was supportive, assuring me he could handle more responsibility around the apartment. I'm not a little kid anymore, he reminded me. I can cook dinner sometimes. I probably won't burn the place down. My parents invited us over to celebrate my acceptance. Mom was having a good week, well enough to cook a small meal with Dad's help. As we ate, they asked about my classes, my plans. For the first time in years, I felt like they were actually listening to me, interested in my life. After dinner, Mom pulled me aside. I have something for you, she said, handing me a small box. Inside was a silver necklace with a simple pendant, a caduceus, the medical symbol. I bought this years ago, Mom explained. When you first talked about becoming a nurse in high school, I was saving it for when you got accepted to a program. I stared at the necklace, speechless. She'd kept it all this time, through everything. Thank you, I managed finally. Mom smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You're going to be an amazing nurse, Katie. You already are. As summer progressed, we settled into a new normal. I worked and prepared for school. Kyle had basketball camp 3 days a week. We had dinner with my parents most Sundays. Mom's condition fluctuated. Good days where she seemed almost her old self. Bad days where she could barely get out of bed. One Sunday in July, we arrived for dinner to find Dad alone in the kitchen, looking haggard. Mom's not feeling well, he explained. She's resting. We ate quietly, the mood subdued. After dinner, I went to check on her while Kyle helped Dad with the dishes. She was awake, propped up on pillows, looking frailer than ever. Sorry I missed dinner, she said, her voice barely audible. Don't worry about it. I sat on the edge of the bed. Can I get you anything? She shook her head, then patted the space beside her. Sit with me a while? I did, and we talked, really talked, for what felt like the first time in forever. About my upcoming classes, about Kyle's basketball prospects, about the past, the mistakes, the regrets, about the future, however long or short hers might be. I want you to know something, she said finally, her voice growing tired. Your father and I, we've updated our will. The house, everything. It's going to you and Kyle. I started to protest, but she held up a hand. Let me finish. We can't undo what we did. We can't give you back those years, but we can make sure you and Kyle are secure going forward. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to refuse, to tell her we didn't need or want anything from them. But another part recognized this for what it was, not a bribe or manipulation, but a genuine attempt to provide for us, to make amends in the only way they knew how. Thank you, I said finally, but I hope we don't have to think about that for a long time. Mom smiled sadly. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. As we drove home that night, Kyle was unusually quiet. You okay? I asked. He nodded, then hesitated. Do you think she's going to die? The bluntness of the question caught me off guard. I don't know, I answered honestly. The doctors are doing everything they can. Kyle stared out the window. I'm not ready for her to die, he said softly. I thought I didn't care anymore, but I do. I reached over and squeezed his hand. I know, me too. The next few weeks brought a rapid decline in Mom's condition. She was hospitalized twice more, each time emerging weaker. Dad called me daily with updates, his voice increasingly desperate. I found myself spending more time at their house, helping with her care, sitting with her while Dad got some rest. One afternoon, while Mom was sleeping and Dad had gone to pick up prescriptions, I was straightening up their bedroom when I found a journal on her nightstand. I knew I shouldn't look, but a page was open, and my name caught my eye. Katie came again today. She'd written in shaky handwriting. She is so strong, so capable. I watch her with Kyle and feel such pride and such shame. Pride in the woman she's become, shame that we failed them both so completely. If I could go back and change one thing in my life, it would be how we handled Kyle's accident. We lost them both that day, through our own cowardice. Now time is running out, and I don't know if they'll ever truly forgive us. I wouldn't blame them if they didn't. I closed the journal quickly when I heard Dad return, but the words stayed with me, echoing in my mind as I drove home, as I helped Kyle with dinner, as I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling. Forgiveness. Was it even possible after everything? Did I want to forgive them? Did Kyle? The next day was Kyle's first basketball game of the summer league. He was starting point guard, a position he'd worked hard for all year. I'd requested the day off work weeks ago, determined not to miss it. That morning, as we were eating breakfast, my phone rang. It was Dad, his voice tight with panic. Mom's back in the hospital. It's bad this time, Katie. Really bad. I felt my stomach drop. How bad? The doctors say? His voice broke. They're saying days, maybe, not weeks. I looked at Kyle across the table, excited about his game, unaware that our fragile new normal was about to shatter again. I'll be there as soon as I can, I told Dad. I just need to figure something out first. After I hung up, Kyle looked at me questioningly. Mom? I nodded. She's back in the hospital. It's not good. Kyle's face fell. My game is important. I finished for him. What time does it start? 4 o'clock, he said. But Katie, if Mom is really bad, I'll figure it out, I promised. Let me make some calls. I called Dad back, explained about Kyle's game. To my surprise, he immediately understood. Go to the game, he said firmly. Mom would want that. Come after. Next, I called Marcus's mom, Christine, who I'd become friendly with over the past year. She agreed to pick Kyle up for the game if needed. No questions asked. And Katie, she added before hanging up, whatever's going on, we're here for you both. The whole team is. I felt a rush of gratitude for this community we'd built, the support system that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with genuine care. I spent the morning at the hospital with Mom. She was unconscious most of the time, the cancer and medications pulling her under. Dad sat beside her bed, holding her hand, looking lost. During one brief moment of lucidity, Mom opened her eyes and saw me. Katie, she whispered. Kyle's game. It's this afternoon, I told her, surprised she'd remembered. Go, she said, her voice barely audible. Tell him. So proud. I felt tears spring to my eyes. I will. I left Dad with promises to return after the game. At home, I found Kyle in his room, staring at his basketball uniform laid out on the bed. Maybe I shouldn't go, he said when he saw me. If Mom is dying, I sat beside him on the bed. Mom specifically said to tell you she's proud of you and wants you to play. Kyle looked up, surprised. She said that? Today? I nodded. She remembered your game was today. He was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then he reached for his uniform. Okay, I'll play. The game was intense. Kyle's team facing their biggest rivals. I sat in the bleachers, trying to focus on the action while my phone sat heavy in my pocket, ready to vibrate with news from Dad. Kyle played brilliantly, scoring 20 points and making the winning shot in the final seconds. The crowd erupted, his teammates lifting him onto their shoulders. I cheered with everyone else, tears streaming down my face. Joy for Kyle's triumph mixed with grief for what was happening at the hospital, what was coming. As the celebration continued, I slipped out to call Dad. Any change? I asked. No, he said. She's sleeping now. How was the game? Kyle was amazing, I told him. They won. Good, Dad said, his voice thick. That's good. After the team celebration, I told Kyle we needed to go to the hospital. He nodded, his post-victory glow fading as reality set back in. We drove in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. At the hospital, we found Dad exactly where I'd left him, holding Mom's hand. She was still unconscious, her breathing shallow. The room was dim, just the glow of monitors illuminating her pale face. Kyle approached the bed hesitantly. He'd been to visit Mom in the hospital before, but this was different. This felt final. We won, he said softly, taking her other hand. I made the winning shot. Mom didn't respond, didn't open her eyes, but I swear her fingers twitched slightly in Kyle's grasp. A final acknowledgement. We stayed through the night, taking turns dozing in the uncomfortable hospital chairs. Nurses came and went, adjusting medications, checking vitals. Around dawn, Mom's breathing changed, becoming more labored. The nurse called for the doctor, who spoke to us in hushed tones about comfort measures, about the end being near. Dad broke down then, sobbing openly. I held Kyle, who was silent, his face a mask of confusion and grief. We'd barely reconciled with our parents, had just started to rebuild some kind of relationship, and now this. Mom died just after sunrise, slipping away quietly while we held her hands. In those final moments, we were a family again, broken, imperfect, but together. The days after Mom's death passed in a blur. Dad was a mess, barely functioning. I handled most of the funeral arrangements, surprised at how many people came to pay their respects. Mom had friends, colleagues, neighbors, people who knew nothing about our complicated family history, who just knew her as the friendly woman from down the street, or the efficient office manager. Kyle stayed close to me throughout the service, occasionally reaching for my hand when emotions threatened to overwhelm him. Dad delivered a halting eulogy, breaking down several times. I didn't speak. First, couldn't find the words. After the funeral, people gathered at my parents' house, our old house. I felt strange moving through those familiar rooms, accepting condolences from strangers, serving food on plates I remembered from childhood dinners. Kyle stuck with his basketball teammates, who had shown up in force, their teenage awkwardness tempered by genuine concern. As the crowd thinned, Dad found me in the kitchen, washing dishes that didn't really need washing. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "I know this doesn't change anything," he continued, "but I want you to know, your mother and I, we were so proud of you, both of you. We didn't know how to show it, how to be the parents you deserved." I set down the dish I was scrubbing. "I know, Dad." And I did know. Not in a way that erased the hurt or justified their actions, but in the complicated way that comes with understanding that people can love imperfectly, fail catastrophically, and still feel genuine regret. In the weeks that followed, Dad and I established a cautious new relationship. He came to Kyle's basketball games, sitting awkwardly beside me in the bleachers. He helped me move into my dorm when classes started, carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs without complaint. He had dinner with us most Sundays, bringing groceries that always seemed to be exactly what we needed. Kyle approached this new version of Dad with careful optimism. They weren't close, might never be, but there was a growing ease between them. Sometimes I'd come home from class to find them watching basketball on TV, arguing good-naturedly about players and strategies. My nursing classes were challenging but fulfilling. I'd come home exhausted, brain full of anatomy terms and medication dosages, to find Kyle doing homework at the kitchen table, dinner already made. Sometimes Dad would be there too, helping Kyle with math problems or just keeping him company. "You don't have to do this," I told Dad once, after he'd fixed our leaky bathroom sink and restocked our refrigerator in the same visit. "I know," he said, "but I want to, if you'll let me." And I did let him, gradually. Not because I'd forgotten or because everything was magically fixed, but because holding on to anger was exhausting, and because Kyle deserved to have whatever family was willing to show up for him now. One evening, about 6 months after Mom died, Dad brought over a box of her things he thought we might want. Photo albums, jewelry, a few books. At the bottom was a sealed envelope with my name on it, in Mom's handwriting. I waited until I was alone to open it. Inside was a letter, dated a few weeks before she died. "Katie," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone. There's so much I want to say to you. So much I should have said while I could. First, thank you. Thank you for being the mother Kyle needed when I couldn't be. Thank you for your strength, your compassion, your forgiveness, even when we didn't deserve it. Second, I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't begin to cover it, I know, but I am so deeply, profoundly sorry for failing you both. For putting my own fears and weaknesses ahead of Kyle's needs. For letting you shoulder a burden that should have been ours. Last, I want you to know how proud I am of the woman you've become. Not because of us, but despite us. You are everything I wish I had been. Brave, selfless, unwavering. Kyle is lucky to have you. Your father is lucky to have you. I was lucky to have you, even when I didn't appreciate it. I hope someday you can forgive us, but even if you can't, please know that we loved you both. Imperfectly, but completely. Live your life, Katie. Be happy. You've earned it." I folded the letter carefully and put it back in its envelope. Then I called Kyle into my room and read it to him. We sat together on my bed afterward, not speaking, just being. "Do you forgive them?" Kyle asked finally. I thought about it. "I'm working on it," I said honestly. "It's not a simple yes or no." Kyle nodded. "Me too." That night, I added Mom's letter to a memory box I'd been keeping for Kyle. Photos of his first steps after the accident, newspaper clippings about his basketball games, birthday cards I'd written him over the years. Our history, complicated and painful and beautiful. 2 years later, I graduated from the nursing program with honors. Kyle, now a high school senior with college basketball scholarships on the horizon, cheered loudly from the audience. Dad sat beside him, older but steadier, clapping until his hands were red. After the ceremony, as we posed for pictures, Dad handed me an envelope. "From your mother," he explained. "She asked me to give it to you when you graduated." Inside was a big check, the remainder of my college fund, enough to cover my bachelor's degree in nursing, and a note. "For the next step, Mom." I looked at Dad, questions in my eyes. "She knew you'd make it this far," he said simply. She never doubted it. That night, we celebrated at our apartment. No longer the tiny place we'd started in, but a slightly larger one we'd moved to last year, with Dad's help. Kyle's basketball trophies lined the shelves, alongside my nursing school awards and framed photos of the 3 of us at various events over the past 2 years. As I looked around at our imperfect, reconstructed family, I thought about the long, winding path that had brought us here. The pain and betrayal, the slow, hesitant steps toward reconciliation, the grief and growth. "What are you thinking about?" Kyle asked, catching my expression. "Just everything," I said. "How different things are now." Kyle nodded, understanding. "Good different though, right?" I smiled at him. This amazing young man who had overcome so much, who had taught me more about resilience and forgiveness than he would ever know. "Yeah," I said. "Good different."